Bene, io di Piero Angela vi dirò poche
What can I
notizie.
say
Una
about
è
Piero
che
Angela? Not
esiste
much,
un
certainly. But one thing is that there is a
Piero Angela,
mollusk that bears his
credo
name.
un gasteropode.
I think it's a
Non
gastropod.
chiedetemi come si
Don't
chiama,
ask
forse
me
non se lo
exactly
ricorda
what its
neanche
name is.
Piero, troppo
Maybe
complicato. Però
Piero
insomma,
can't
quando
remember
uno
it
dice
either.
il
Too
nome,
complicated. But
non
it is a
solo
great
avere
honor
doppia
not only
cittadinanza
to
in
have
Italia,
a
ma avere
dual
un
citizenship in
naturalista che
Turin,
scopre
but to have
nuove
a
specie
naturalist, a
inedite
biologist
e la
who
individua.
discovers
Cittadinanza
a
per
new
molluschi.
type of
C'è un
citizenship and
oggetto
names
comunque
it
molto
after him.
diffuso
Yes,
che porta il nome
citizenship
di Piero
amongst
Angela e
mollusks,
questo è un
but
asteroide.
there is
Quindi
something
di
which
Piero
he
Angela dico solo
really
queste
likes.
due
It
notizie.
is that
Esiste
an
in
asteroid
natura
was also named after him.
anche
So, two
come
bits of news
specie vivente
that
non umana
he exists
nello
as a
spazio
non-human
come oggetto
species
celeste.
and in the space,
Chiarissimo, un
or in
orbita
space
tra
as a planet
Marte e
that
Giove.
orbits
La
between
terza e
Mars
ultima
and
notizia
Jupiter.
di
The
Piero
third
Angela
and
è
last
che
bit of news that I'm going to give you about Piero
fece il
Angela
primo
is that
telescopio
in Turin he
mediatore
had an onset as a popularizer,
alla
not
il 19
exactly
aprile
like GiovedìScienza, but a
1984,
bit like it,
quando
on
presso al
April the
Teatro
19th of
Nuovo di
1984, when at
per
the
un'iniziativa
Teatro
che si
Nuovo
chiamava
in
Pianeta Vita,
Turin, which was called
tenne una
Planet
conferenza
Life,
intitolata
he held a
La
conference
macchina
that
per
was called
pensare. La macchina per
the
pensare è
Thinking
questa,
Machine. This is our thinking
deve essere
machine, our
comunque formata dalle
brains,
carotidi, abbiamo detto la
which
parola
must always
carotide.
have um,
E quindi
be blood
nacque
sent to
come
it by the carotids
la
and
tradizione
or
poi di
carotids.
questi incontri che sono arrivati
This was the
al
first one
32
of the many meetings that now have
Bene,
reached the
c'è un
32nd
libro
year.
che ci fa da
Well, we
guida
have a
nel
book
tempo e io
which is going to
partirei
guide
così
us, and I would
da
like
questo
to
libro. La prima
start
pagina sarà una
describing the
filosofia
chapters of this book. It'll be a
un
conversation, in
racconto
fact.
autobiografico
It'll
che passerà
be
dal
an
popolarizing
autobiographical tale which will move through the
passiamo
popularization. But let's start with a few facts and figures. In the first figures, he describes a Turin that no longer exists.
Andare avanti vorrei aggiungere una cosa rispetto a quello che ha detto per
Well,
ultimo,
before
e
going
cioè
on, I would like to
sarà
add
Piero
one
Bianucci
thing.
a portare avanti tutti questi
That
incontri.
is to say
Io
that
a
it will
Roma
be Piero
cambio di
Bianucci who is
turno
the one who developed and carried on all
alcune
these
cose, ma
meetings because
sarà
I'm in Rome. Every
Piero
now and
Bianucci, infatti
again I come
andava
here,
arrestato,
but you were the
perché
one who did it.
arrestato il
Piero
direttore.
Bianucci, I
Però,
am virtually a press
ma
agent
è vero
because he's an
perché
extraordinary
poi
person.
nessuno parla di lui, lui
But it's
è un
true.
giornalista della stampa conosciuto, ma
No
è
one
una
speaks of
persona,
him.
è una delle persone
He's
più
known, but
intelligenti,
he's a
competenti,
person.
modeste
He
che
is
io conosca.
one of the most
E quindi ogni
intelligent,
volta
expert, and
tolgo il
modest people
cappello
that
quando
I
lo
know.
vedo. È un
And
grande
therefore, every
saggista, sa
time
tutto.
I doff my
E
hat
vede
when I
tutto,
see
anche
him, he's a
proprio
wise person. He
intelligente.
knows everything about everything.
Diciamo che c'è una cosa in comune tra di noi, la
There's
curiosità,
something
questo
that we
sì.
do share, and
E
that's
noi abbiamo
curiosity.
imparato
And
qualcosa
we
proprio
have
per
learnt
la nostra
something
curiosità, perché
because
ogni
of our
volta si va a
curiosity, because
esplorare da
every
giornalisti un
time,
campo
as a
che ancora non
journalist,
si
you
conosce.
explore something you don't
E
know.
la Torino che Piero Angela
Now,
descrive in
the
questi primi
Turin
capitoli, un
that
po'
Piero
come l'aveva
Angela
visto perché
describes is
quando ero
something which
bambino
I
venivo
too saw because when I
accompagnato
was a
a
child,
scuola
I
e
was
passavo in
accompanied
mezzo a
to
macerie, passavo in
school
mezzo a
and
case che erano state
I
abbattute
saw
dai
houses
bombardamenti.
that had still
E
been,
Angela ci
well, they'd been
descrive questa
bombed and
Torino
hadn't been
povera anche
rebuilt.
quella
And
addirittura
Angela
antecedente a questi
describes this
bombardamenti.
and describes also the one
Immaginate
before
che
the
io sono
bombings.
nato
Yes,
poco dopo
don't
che
forget that I was
abbia
born
attraversato l'Atlantico per la prima
soon
volta
after
e che
Lindenberg
il
crossed the
generale
Atlantic for the
Nobile era
first time
tornato
and that General
dal Polo
Nobile
Nord dopo
had
la
come
sua
back from the North
disgrezia
Pole
purtroppo
with
tragica.
the
Quando sono
after his
nato io,
catastrophic
la guerra
journey. Now, when I was
24
born,
giorni
the life
e
expectancy was
cose sono
52.
andate
Luckily,
meglio, ma
things
pensare
have
che ieri che
improved.
è passata
But to give an idea
rapidamente il
of
tempo
how
attraverso una
time
generazione. E,
can change
quindi
in
ho conosciuto
the
una
range of a
Torino che siamo
generation.
degli anni
I
30,
knew a Turin and the Turin of the
quando
30s
c'era
when
la gran parte delle cose che ho
most of the
visto.
things that there are today
Era,
didn't exist.
ricordo che
I remember
c'erano
that,
i frigoriferi per esempio, il
for example,
ghiaccio
there were no
arrivava
fridges and
portato a
ice
spalla in grandi
was
pani,
carried
riempiti di ghiaccio
in
che gli uomini
large
portavano su,
pieces on their
sacchi di
backs
juta
in jute bags. And then at home, you took a hammer, and my sister and I did it, and then you put it in the ice box. Then there was a tap for cool water, and sheets were put in big bags, and with horses there were some women who came and took them to Settimo, where they were then washed. The women went to get milk. I lived in Corso Galileo Ferraris at number 14, and they used to have a container with a ladle. They would ladle out the milk that they sold us. Cars, virtually none. I remember that the pavements were totally free. I also remember, well, it was a world where presents, something you received at Christmas, 1 or 2 toys, and on your birthday. Now, for example, I see that children receive lots and lots of prizes and toys and everything. People didn't go out in the night. There was a lot more time to think. I tell people in the book, I had a normal childhood. I never had a privilege. My parents, normal parents, in that they didn't hit us, they didn't get drunk, but they were normal. And my father was very strict. My mother was very happy. Your father was a doctor who did a lot for the freedom of this country. Thank you. Yes, compared to him, I am this height, but I did inherit the values that he passed down to me, and I think he would be pleased of this. That is to say, to be honest and to be personally and intellectually honest, and then this love for science that he too had. But I was saying that this Turin was... I used to go to school, the D'Azeglio school, and you used to cycle there. And I remember that you used to go round the block with mates in the early afternoon. There were girls too, and we used to chat. And there was a schoolmate who didn't have a bike, but he too wanted to take part. And so he used to run behind us, and then every now and again he used to stop. He was exhausted, and he waited for us coming round again. This youngster whose father died in a concentration camp, I met him some time later. He was the Italian attaché cultural attaché in Bucharest, and because he'd written to me, and I went to him and held a conference. I told this story in the book. Many years had gone by, and I thought he'd died. No, he was still alive, and he said, "Look, I'm still here. No, he says, I've got a bicycle now." And I think we'll meet up. So very few presents.
Però un regalo grande.
But one big present did arrive, and that was a piano. A big present because you had a passion for music. But this piano was not successful at the end. This is a story which I often tell people to explain that teaching very often is punitive. That you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Even music is like this, while it should be a pleasure. Because I had someone in primary school at school with me who was my best friend. And he came from a very important family in Turin from a cultural point of view. His great-grandfather had been the first president of the Science Museum. He translated Darwin into Italian, and he was the son of a lawyer who was a music critic too, and the mother was a painter, and I took lessons from her. And his name was Ludovic because of Beethoven, because they had decided he was going to become a concert player, so he studied it seriously. And I said, me too, me too, me too. And since, as happened, especially for the girls, but they used to play the piano. But my teacher used to teach me as if I too had to be a concert pianist. But I wanted to have fun. I wanted to learn how to play classical music, maybe write something. So it was so boring. And they do this, do that, and scales and everything. Both my sister and I said, enough. We locked ourselves in the bathroom. My mother came to knock and on the door, but she said, I'm very sorry, there's no vocation, goodbye. But the piano was still there. So I started to play the things I heard on the radio, little songs and things, with the maid who used to sing, and I would accompany her. Slowly, I started enjoying it when I started to discover, thanks to a violinist of a very small orchestra, said, why don't you accompany her with the left? For example, C, E, G, B, C, E, G, B. And that was suddenly an illumination. And after the war, jazz arrived. I had also some other schoolmates with 10 o'clock, a bit like Radio London. We used to listen to Radio Stuttgart, which was an American station that used to broadcast jazz for the American Armed Forces. And we too have tried to do it. And we'd set up a group just to have fun. And then I became very good as an amateur, but nearly a professional. At that point, I decided that I wanted to study because I was motivated, the motivation we were talking about before. So I went back to her, same one, same teacher, and she said, where did you learn? And I said, I learned on my own. I prepared the 5th year's exam. I sat it at the music school, and I started preparing the 8th. I sat all my exams, and at a certain point, I have no intention of becoming a pianist, but I wanted to write music for documentaries, which I had started doing, and I was very interested in it. And then I liked jazz with my friends, and I'd also started to play with good professionals. There were these 3 things at one point merged, engineering, music, and radio, and I ended up by doing what I'm doing. Here in this room, there's the person Gigi Marsico, who's the person who changed my life. He used to work at the radio, and he said to me, he's here from Turin, there was no television at the time. He said, I'd like to have 2 programs on the history of jazz. And he brought me in as a consultant, as an expert. We did this, and at that point, I learned those new techniques and special effects, mixing and so on. And I started working with some small texts. At a certain point, there was a test because they needed for new speakers, they gave me a microphone, and I said, look, I don't know how to do this. And they said, so much so that there's someone here who's very good and who's studying maths. And in fact, he and I both went, and we were both selected, but simply as possible. It wasn't a real selection. But as time went by, in the summer, they needed, because people were on holiday, and we both started working for the regional programs, and then slowly things went on. But without ever being employed, because finding a job at the radio station, well, it was far from us. But at a certain point, you got a permanent job. Yes, after 8 years, they understood one very important thing, and that was a public service. And if you're working for a public service, you must be independent. You must not have to say thank you to anyone except to your professional skills. And this accompanied all my professional life. Many times I've had and I said, people have encouraged me to do this or that, and I said, sorry, I'm not interested. I have no ambitions. In all my history, I've always been yes, of course, I had some ad personam or personal recognition, but only because I did a certain job. I said this in the book. They suggested that I should be the director of the news. I said I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in becoming the head of one of the stations. I wasn't interested. I do what I like. But when there was the division in three, that is in 76, Rai 1, 2, and 3, that is the broadcasting company, the public Italian broadcasting company. At that point, there was a sort of extraordinary balance. You know those Calder mobiles where the things, if you have, on the one hand, the radio programs went to that party, but the news went to the other one. Yes, the Calder mobiles. And so everyone had their own niche. The appointment of the second channel news was at that point to the Republican Party, who was Ugo La Malfa. He came to see me. In fact, he phoned me. Somebody from the Republican Party phoned me, and he said, look, I would like to meet you. And I said, we can see you in a bar, because I don't go to party headquarters. We met up in a bar, and he said, in this situation, the Right Honourable La Malfa has been asked to give a name for the second channel news. I thank him very much. Thank you very much, but I'm not interested. And he insisted, no, but look, we want someone like you, independent and so on. April the 25th, the Liberation Day for the television. I said, I know television very well. I know that is for a place for people who have other features, not like me. But since you insist, I can accept on one condition, that is to say that every week I have a press conference and I say who phoned me and what they asked me. Yes, we've understood. Now we have to fast forward because time is not a lot. There was the moon landing, and there were the Apollos things, but amongst other services or other, for example, programs that he did on wars, he also worked on the Apollo one, and he decided that scientific popularization would have been the best thing for him and very important for the public. He wrote a number of books from 0 to 3 years, Archimedes, but one that became very successful and which was the series of the paranormal with a person who became very famous later with Mr. Mike Bongiorno. It also became a book. And this was the seed, which then became the CICAP. What do you remember of that series, the CICAP? Well, as you were saying, I had a series of programs there going to see what was true and what wasn't true, because at the time it was seen as a sort of science, a problematic science, but people Mike Bongiorno, who was the famous president, presented Inardi, the famous doctor in Bologna, and when we went to see it, There was absolutely nothing. Of course, I was attacked because of it. So I established a committee with about 20 of the best Italian scientists, including Edoardo Amaldi. And we started doing things of counter-information, but also trying to investigate. But I realized that scientists had other things to do. Clearly, they would sign statements, but in the end, they had other things to do. And that we had to have some volunteers. One was Massimo Polidoro, and the other one was Montale. I can tell you something. This gentleman is someone I know. No, yes. Massimo Polidoro. Does this mean he's here? Yes or no? Because they told me they're going to be surprises.
Ma guarda,
sorpresa.
vedi questo ragazzo. Posso raccontare la tua storia?
Surprise.
Volentieri, guarda,
O la
grazie.
racconti tu?
Can I tell your story?
Piacere se la racconti tu.
Would you like to tell it? No.
Dicevo, c'era bisogno
I
di
would be
volontà.
pleased if you told it. We needed volunteers. And
Casualmente,
by chance,
storico, Valerio Castronovo mi inviò in quel periodo
Valerio Castronovo, historian, sent me some essays by last year students on science. They had written things. It was something to see what the scientific level was, and he had packs of them, but he sent some examples to me, and there were some which were, but there was one which was wow, which was really above the others, and I said, this is the right person. Maybe that someone like this could be one of the volunteers. I went to Milan to meet up with him to see if it was really what he'd written, and he was called Lorenzo Montali, very, very intelligent. And I said, you have just won 10 million of mine, because it was the old liras, because I'd started earning quite a lot. And I said, I don't have to spend the money all for me. Let's give some to youngsters. So he was now a professor of psychology at the University of Milan, but then he was in his last year of high school. And I said to him, with this money, you can go to a university in Buffalo, where in the US, where there's a group with Professor Kurz, and you spend a period and you learn a few things. He accepted and he went. At that time in Rome, the famous American James Randi, the one with the white beard, who was a magician, an extraordinary man. And I received a letter from a youngster from Voghera, Massimo Polidoro, who's saying, I've read your book, we've got to do something, why don't we meet up, and so on and so forth. So I said to Polidoro, well, come to Rome, because he said that he was a young magician. And he came to Rome, and I said to James Randi, I said, I've met this youngster, and I think he's very youngster. Would you please examine him in the next 3 days? And he spent with him, because for him he was the tops. And he said, what do you think of it? Well, look, this one is someone who understands things that other people don't understand. Do you want to take him with him? Other 10 million, and off he went. Yes, he spent a year with him, and he became Randy's assistant. Then he wanted to be a magician, and we convinced him, no, first you must graduate. Poltergeist there. You must graduate. He graduated in psychology, and thereafter you've written how many books? About 40, Fauter. So he wrote a bit of this and the other, novels, but he really became the machine, the engine of this Cicab, which was established in a restaurant in Vianucci here in Turin with just 4 of us, and it became It is recognized as a charity, but it also works, because it's not for profit, it works with the ministry, with the Ministry for the University, with the Institute of Health, and where there's something strange, Massimo Polidoro comes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Massimo Polidoro. And we should also remember that in that initial group, there was also Professor Tullio Regge, the famous physicist. And in Turin, there is an exhibition which is also Tullio Regge, who was part of CICAP and was one of the lights of the CICAP. And we're going to move on because there's very little time. At a certain point, Piero Angela got the idea that he would invent a program which became a brand, and that was Quark. Quark still exists, because then it proliferated. It was a brand that expanded. But at the beginning, Quark was a very small thing. They were just a few volunteers following Piero Angela who thought they would do something absolutely crazy. Early evening, very short, fast, intelligent, short interviews, interviewing foreign scientists because there are no conditioning. They're also used to the fact that there's popularization. And that's when it started. And if I'm right, I think there was somebody who worked with you, somebody very important at the time, who was one of the very first people who worked with you. There was Pauli, Pinna. The one is Lorenzo Pinna, Giangi Polli, Malchi Visalberghi, the three. That's what I would say, these three. Lots of people.
Ci sono due persone che io cito sempre.
There are two people that I always mention because of their intelligence, quality, modesty, honesty, etc. One, that's the other one, Lorenzo Pinna.
Voi lo conoscete certamente attraverso tutti i servizi che dal 1981.
Since 1981, he's been working for Super Quark, and we've written books, many books together, on atmosphere, on the ocean, on democracy, on energy. I would say, though, we must also remember Giangi Polli and Marco Visalberghi. You have already remembered, and Bianucci, who took part in the first ones. I still remember a very special object under observation, and that was the sun. And there was another one on the infinite. The enormous topics. I must say that what I most remember is not something, but something else. That was, as I say, the Giotto probe near Halley's Comet in 1986, where Lorenzo and I were in Amsterdam and you were in Rome. And the extraordinary thing was that that night, when for the first time humans saw a comet, we didn't see anything because the probe was programmed so that it could never, because they didn't think that the comet was black, so only a corner of it, and the scientists didn't understand what was happening. And Rome, Piero Angela said, well, tell us what is happening. We didn't know because the scientists didn't know, but there was 7 million people listened to us at 2 in the morning. 7 million people at 1 a.m. Lorenzo, you've done lots of things, haven't you? Still working, aren't you? Yes, we're still continuing things. With Lorenzo Pinna, we did one thing which was very important, I must say. We organized with the San Paolo, we had created at the time a committee to favor the popularization of science and organize things. And we did two very important initiatives in the 80s. First of all, the World Conference on Atmosphere. People came from all over the world. And at the same time, there was also a program at the sports center. There were 8,000 people there. That gives a certain emotion, but to talk about atmosphere. The interesting thing is that at the time, the director of Rai Uno was Emanuele Milano, a person who was very well educated and very proper. And he decided that yes, we would have it live. And we were sort of early evening. The next morning at 10 o'clock, there was a meeting in the hall with all the directors to talk about various things. And Emanuele Milano was told off because you're saying you can't put those programs in early evening because you must have audience. So we can put this on the third channel. And that moment, they received audiences. 6 million people had listened. So that was the end of that. And that was repeated for the ocean. We had an enormous, meeting at the sports center with Lorenzo Pinna. It became a book as well as book. They became audio cassettes that went to 10,000 Italian schools to make these science professors aware of these environmental topics, which were just taking off on climate change, new technology, so on and so forth. This was when we realized what the greenhouse effect was. So Lorenzo Pinna has always been a forerunner. He's now writing a book on artificial intelligence, which is what we'll be talking about in the coming years. So we're waiting for this book. Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Thank you, Piero. Thank you. And so we've now reached Quark. And we have, it was quite difficult to have this broadcast with new ideas and with very large audiences. So you also helped with lovely little drawings. Oh yes, cartoons. You worked with Bruno Bozzetto. Don't tell me that Bruno Bozzetto is coming. No, but Bruno Bozzetto played a very important role.
Non tutto quello che mangiamo viene assimilato.
Not all we eat is assimilated. For example, the fibers contained in fruit and vegetables or in pulses transit through our organism, having released their proteins, vitamins and minerals. But this transit is very useful because it's as if it were brushing away from the gut the residues of the food, an action which is also considered as a prevention of cancer. That was Bruno Bozzetto's work.
Bruno, vieni fuori.
Bruno, come out. Bruno, come out.
Come stai?
How are you?
Ma che bello vederti.
Nice to see you.
Con Lorenzo Pinna,
Lorenzo Pinna, I see him. I never see you. I speak to you on the phone. We worked virtually 10 years on the phone and have enormous fun, as you were saying, because it's lovely to work like that, and especially with people like you. Do you remember how we met? I can tell you. You're a better speaker. 1980-81. I received a letter from Bruno Bozzetto, whom, as everyone I knew as a cartoonist for Allegro non troppo, genius, I thought. Bozzetto has written, I wonder what he wants. He said, I read your book, The Man and the Puppet. It's like a movie. Why don't we make a movie out of it? And I said, yes, I was honored and also very much struck by it. So I said, I'm very, very pleased about that, but possibly it is something a bit. Why don't we first try it? It might be a bit too much of a big venture. I'm about to start a program, a science program, and we could try to have some little bits with cartoons of science illustrated by cartoons. And I then worked for the cultural page of Repubblica and also wrote articles. And I'd just written an article which was entitled, How Much Oil Does a Philosopher Use? Because philosophers are the maximum consumers of oil. This is something which would take us very far. But they don't produce food. They don't produce objects, they don't produce services, they just are consumers. He's a philosophy graduate, but it was a paradox to say that most of the people do jobs now that do not produce food, objects, or services like what I do. But they produce ideas, all the sort of things a society, an advanced society needs. And I sent this article to him, and I wrote the sort of gags that could help. And I covered them because I didn't want to read what he said. I wanted to see how I interpreted it. And the ridiculous thing was that in the end, they matched. When I uncovered his, I said, we're perfect symbiosis, and we worked very well. Because when he used to fold it, not to look, because I didn't want to see, but what I'm very grateful to him, to Piero, is that thanks to Quark and thanks to him, cartoons were accepted because originally it had been considered something for children. Bruno Bozzetto's put a lot of poetry and humor, but beware, because to be useful, to say some useful things, so much so that I still find people who I decided to be an engineering because I used to see Quark and the cartoons. So this was fantastic because it made it possible for us to open new paths. With the cartoons, you can explain things that otherwise you couldn't explain. I always say, if, for example, you speak quantum mechanics, embryology, genetics, there's nothing to film because molecules, with a camera. So what do? What does professor do? They draw things. He does it, but he does it in an extraordinary manner. Let us say that let's have another pill. Shall we have another pill by Bruno Bozzetto? Maybe I won't remember it. Certainly. Thank you. Thank you so much. Electricity is something very useful, but not when a device is faulty and when you are barefoot on damp surfaces.
Adesso non ricordo più cosa c'è.
I can't remember where that came from, but...
Pillole? Prego.
Please.
E tra l'altro questo mi fa venire in mente che...
This reminds me that using cartoons, Bozzetto's cartoons and others, so we had... If you watch television programs, they're a bit rigid. There are different types. There's news, there's shows and so on, but it's very difficult to have science programs, of course. There's Super Quark and the like, but I said, why shouldn't we also have science programs which are sort of 30 seconds and scatter them everywhere. That is to say, contamination of science.
Quindi pensai di fare.
So I thought I found a director who accepted, and I did 230-second pills, as we called them, not only science, but a certain of the socially useful topics, for example, reading, music, culture, so on. Dangers, the house, education, and things like that. And they had 5,000 of them, including many by Bruno Bozzetto.
Dalle quali quelli di Bruno
Bozzetto. And I think that this, and I wrote it in one of my books, the way in which we could add science to where it doesn't exist. We have a 2-hour program, well, 2 hours are long, but if you do 30 seconds, think that these little pills, as we used to call them, for a certain time, it was also included in advertising, so they really were seen, and they were repeated, and sometimes we still see some. And I was thinking of something, that while maybe it is easier to prepare a quarter of an hour service or a 1 hour, 2 hour program, it's very difficult to have a 30-second program where you communicate these concepts. Paolo Conte once said, life is like a crocodile, but a song is like a lizard. It's more difficult to be a lizard than a crocodile. In a song, you have all your life, but it's in 3 minutes, and one of the pills is like that. Now, changing subject a little bit, there weren't that many women, were they, in Quark and Super Quark? I remember the Barbara Gallavotti, yes. No, there have been.
Che piacere.
What a pleasure.
Ciao, manca la sedia. Sedia, ragazzo.
Chair, please, chair.
In Svizzera, e quindi
Because she lives in
ci manda le
Switzerland now.
sue meraviglie,
So she
in
sends
un pacchetto.
her wonderful things, but we always speak. So Barbara Gallavotti, I'll tell you something with her permission. I asked her. We used to speak over the phone because she worked and still works for GiovedìScienza and the Stampa. I'd never seen her. But then once, since she in particular, she works in physics and in the press office in INF. She said in Pisa there's a gravitational wave antenna that's being built, and nobody was speaking about it. Why don't you come to Pisa to see the work that's ongoing? We're starting to inaugurate things. There will be antenna. It'll be time, in fact, many years. But now, yes, it's working very well. In August, yes, it's the one with the 2 Americans that picked up the gravitational waves, so they understood where they were coming from. And so I said, how will we recognize each other? And she said, well, I'm too thin for my height, but I have long hair. And that's how we meet her. She's the girl you saw. She thought that she was too thin. She's one of the people who knows everything. She has graduated in biology, but she knows everything about physics. I must say that this evening I'm really especially emotional about it, because I'm with the 2 people who made it possible for me to do the work I do, which, as you say, when you do the job you like, it's not really work. Because I started as a scientific journalist, thanks to Piero Bianucci, who trusted me when there was no reason to trust me at all, and then Piero Angela, who taught me all the things I learned to do. All the things I do, in fact. The 2 Pieros, the 2 Peters, that made it possible for me.
Comincia a vedere un po', a farti venire delle idee.
Well, get ideas for next year. What are you doing now, Barbara? I also work with Alberto for Ulysses, so this is the season of Ulysses, the other program. I hope that you've been following that, and then I'm preparing the new ideas for Super Quark. Sometimes I write for the Stampa. I keep having fun. Thank you.
A presto.
Adesso però vorrei fare...
And now, yes, come and get the chair. Take it.
Prego, lo faccio pure. Sì. Ah, no,
Let's
rimane.
leave it.
C'è qualcuno.
La scienza una volta alla
Science,
settimana
once
va
a
bene,
week,
fatta
is fine.
per 3-4 mesi, 6
Done
mesi,
for
come
2-3
succede.
months,
Però
6
la
months.
scienza è una cosa
But
quotidiana,
science
cioè noi
is
siamo continuamente
something which
immersi nella
we are
tecnologia,
immersed
siamo
in day after
continuamente
day.
immersi
We're
nei
immersed in
frutti della
technology, in
scienza
the
di base che
fruit
diventa scienza
of fundamental science that becomes
io so
applied
che
science.
ora che sei
Now, I
cittadino
know
torinese
that
due
now
volte,
you're
sarai
twice a
doppiamente fiero di
Turinese
questa
citizen,
città e ti
you're
farà
twice
piacere
proud of this city, so
ricordare,
you
io sto
will
per farlo,
remember, and
che
I'm
in questa
trying
città
to
è
do it,
nato
that in this
l'unico
city we
telegiornale
had the only
quotidiano di
daily
scienza,
new
che è
science
TG
newsreel,
Leonardo.
which is TG Leonardo.
TG Leonardo ha un
TG
volto
Leonardo
femminile.
has the face of a
certo.
woman.
Adesso vediamo.
Is
arriverà?
who's going to come?
Silvia Rosa Brusini.
Silvia Rosa
Ma che
Brusini.
piacere!
Ma che piacere
What
essere
pleasure,
qua con
great
te,
pleasure
che
to be
bello.
here with you. When they told me we're going to have a surprise, I said, you know, like the ladies who jump out of the cake, I thought that was going to be, I'm a bit old to jump out of a cake, but I told you lots of times, you must come to Rome, because otherwise from Turin you can't do all the things that you could do, but you're not going to tell them the real truth. I've told you, and I said yes, but why don't we have Super Quark together? And you said no, no, no.
Non portarcela via da tutto.
Don't, you've taken away everything from Turin. You can't take Silvia Rosa Brusin. I remember that when I started working on the radio in Via Montebello, then television started in Turin in Italy. Now, this new place where the first programs are is a car park. Yes, when I see it, it's really heartbreaking, I agree. Yes, and they're very interesting people there and people who know how to do television, but in Rome has sucked everything away, but you still can do things in Turin. You know that Leonardo is about to be 25 years old, the science newsreel, and I'll take advantage, and you know on which day its birthday is. December the 22nd, the day of your birthday, and then they say that it's fluke. And then they say that fluke doesn't exist. Yes, it does exist, but it's sometimes amusing. I remember when I saw you the first time and you were coming down from a synapses because he was shooting the wonderful wonderful documentary on the human's body. On the human's body was shot in 1990 and it still works. 89, 90, yeah. Because Piero Angela does bring things to Turin when he can. It's not easy to convince the Romans and maybe also the ones in Turin, but I remember that there was something on the cosmos, Journey in the Cosmos, and we did it here in Turin. Have you ever asked yourself scientifically, while so many people love you so much? At long last, the right question, said by Silvia, because it's true. Look at this theater. It's full of love for you. I'm saying in particular of the staff I worked with. This staff really loved me in the sense that there's a good relationship, but also there's one thing which is important, that I'm polite. in many years
che lavoro con delle redazioni.
of work with staff. I used to work alone initially, but for the past 30 years, or nearly 40, I've been working with staff. I have never raised my voice once. This with people who work with you. But look, all of us, why do we all love you so much? Why don't you go there one by one? Yes, that's the Frassica system. He used to phone people, yes. Because in fact, I think, as the politician used to say, modestly, I would say that you have never presented just things saying, I am going to explain something which is difficult to understand. You've always said, I'm going to tell you a wonderful story, and I think this is the secret. Thank you. And also the lightness with which you said some things, and a bit of humor, which Bozzetto, and a lot of other things, and another things which I perceived, and many tell me, that you feel that I don't do it for personal interest, but because for the pleasure of sharing knowledge with others. And I would add that you can feel that you are your first audience because you wanted to understand that thing and then you shared it with others. Yes, first you have to understand, then you can explain. It's not so simple, Silvia, is it? Not so simple. And you know 1,000, you've selected 100, you decided the 10 were the important ones, and you give us 5, which are the right ones to understand. Thank you. We're now going to move on to conclusion, because we haven't gone through the whole book, but thank you. But we've got bits and pieces, so there's a bit in the middle, but I'm sure that you will read it finished. I think you will read it and you'll find all the things that we didn't say. Excuse me. We have an insistent question from the audience. Can we have this insistent question? Yes. I would like to know if it's possible for you to sign the book. Here I am. Where is he? In fact, there is a question. What is your next book? And while you're answering, I'll come and join you. Next book, I don't know, but you know, these books always start in a rather random manner, because listening to something or meeting a person, reading, I say, well, that is something which I could navigate. I've got a few ideas, but you know what it is? I know I didn't doubt that. But this book, which is called My Long Journey, 90 years, it's next year, but in any case, because 90's a good figure, 90 years of stories, I sort of considered it my last book. Well, you know, it's a bit like people who say goodbye. Once you say goodbye, well, there's still a few things. There's still one performance to go. So we have this embarrassment. Wasn't this the last one? And people will say, well, how long is he going to live? How long is he going to, what is he going to write next? So I don't know. The day before yesterday, well, every now and again I say in my project, but I'll never fulfill it, my project is not to write a book, but a record, piano record. And I exercise, but I should have more time. I never do it. Also because I'm very self-critical. Don't exaggerate. So the other day I received an email from the director of the Sony saying, why don't we meet? And I said, we can write a contract. And I said, write up a contract. And I said, I would like to do that. But I was saying, as far as self-criticism is concerned.
Beh, due al prezzo di uno qui.
Two for the price of one here.
Non dovevi dare da altre parti.
Weren't you supposed to be elsewhere? Yes, there's an airplane. Yes, there's a plane waiting for you. I've got about a quarter of an hour. Let's use him then. We don't meet up very often because he's well, if you come here, you'll find him. In fact, it's very rare to see us together because we have various projects, but we have done something. In fact, we did something here in '89 together, and it was a very important moment because it was a beginning. We presented the book on the origins of man, December the 5th, 1989, and it wasn't GiovedìScienza because then it was Tuesday. Here we are.
Che cosa fate? Quali sono I problemi che dovete affrontare? Noi in genere conosciamo solo sulle difficoltà che ci sono prima dei
Talking about the difficulties in paleontology, I would like to start with these two findings. We're talking about prehistory. These are two skulls, or these are the calques of two skulls, the two hominids who lived about a million and a half. Well, now hominids, here we are. But I must say something, that moment was quite significant for me because I had never worked in public with so many people in front of me. And I remember that suddenly I was in a full theater, packed, and what helped me were these lights because I couldn't see anyone. It was good because I couldn't see anybody. But this is a clip. You must know that, first of all, then already, I was already here presenting. And we were filming things. I had more hair. So if we want to can destroy the evidence, but you record everything. No, we haven't kept everything, but some important things have been kept. And that was the time when the two Angelas jointly entertained the audience, and this happened again, and many years later. He was then 26, it was 89. 11 plus 17, half my life ago. 11 plus 17, you do the sum, 28 years ago. So we're fine, we're here, we're all well. Where are you about to go off to? As Barbara was saying, we're preparing Ulysses. Some are being broadcast. There's a new program which we're working on, which will be broadcast on Rai Uno on the UNESCO sites. So special events throughout Italy, and we're trying to explain the wonders that we have. Is it true that the fact that you were called Angela at the beginning hindered you? I have to be honest, I've never really taken much notice of it. You didn't start in Italy, did you? No, you started in Switzerland. In fact, for very many years, I was on digs. In fact, those two skills. Yes, I started with Johansson, the discoverer of Lucy and Tim White and so on. And then there were some teams of television teams that were filming. At a certain point, they had a documentary that was a broadcast in Switzerland, and I was asked to go and comment. I went there, and they saw that I was okay in these live ones, and they said, well, why don't you do this? But I was the Swiss television, so I thought nobody would ever know about it, because then the Tele Monte Carlo bought the program and broadcast it in Italy, which was a 7 at the time. I started, but I must be honest, I always did things as I like to. I always thought that the problem of surname was another person's problem, not mine. If you do things, if you do them properly, especially in a scientific world, then the others will judge you. Thank you.
Visto che abbiamo ancora
Since we have a few minutes left and that other surprises after this one are impossible,
io vorrei farvi
I would like to
Alberto Agliotti,
Alberto
Angela,
Alberto Angela, Piero Angela,
insomma,
Piero
due
Bianucci.
Alberti, due Pieri.
Two Albertos, two Pieros.
Di Alberto Agliotti ci sono molte cose da dire. Egli
There are a lot
ingegnere
can be said about Alberto Agliotti. He's an electrical engineer. This was the last thing you could say. Graduated at the Turin Polytechnic and a long time ago. And 2 years as a researcher, and he got his PhD. In the meantime, and this is obviously, again, it's by chance, he also liked music, and he's a musician. He is also a musician. No. I play. I play a lot of instruments, all in the same way. Not well? Well, the others will. Well, not true. Your first, we would play the saxophone and the violin. He didn't study. Piero.
No, ma non parliamo di me. Io sono qui solo.
I want to speak about myself. He works for many publishers, for school books, and he created something called Occam's razor, which I think reminds people of Chicap, because it's what tells you that when there is an explanation which is complicated and the simple one, usually the complicated one is impossible and the other one is simple. So Occam's razor is something that he established as Occam's razor, and this is not also random. He organizes some internships of scientific journalism, and so he has established a school of scientific journalists. The motto was how to become Piero Angela. And in the meantime, in all these years, there are many, about 12, I think, he has established a large number of small Piero Angelas, some of whom have also developed. And since yesterday, you kindly visited the exhibition. You will have also met some young girls and boys who were explaining this exhibition, which is at the Academy of Science. It's free. You can go happily. You can go whenever you want. You can come back until the 18th of March. So don't lose the opportunity. Many of these youngsters who will guide you are students of Occam's razor. A lot of little Pieros wandering around the city and the world. So I would like to tell you the last thing, how just like we had those December the 5th, 1989, when Piero Angela and Alberto Angela did something together, this evening Piero Bianucci and Alberto Agliotti are doing something together, in the sense that I will be leaving and retiring, and he will be leading them, but he will not be alone. Every now and again I'll come. I hope that you will welcome me in spite of my age. Don't be afraid. He will be there, and we will try to develop these 32 years for another 32 if we're successful. Clearly inviting very often Piero Angela and Alberto Angela, because we're sure that then we will fill the theater. I will continue. Another 32 years.
Come sono I tuoi minuti, Alberto?
Alberto, time? We're still there.
Allora, Questo adesso gli facciamo uno scherzo. Fai tu una
Now,
domanda a
you
loro
ask
due.
them a question.
Ma in casa
But at home,
che cosa si guardava?
what did you watch on television, or what do you watch?
Sì.
And if the two are on being broadcast, do you have you on at the same time? No, I don't think it's ever happened.
Almeno questo.
No, we try to avoid it. I can say that at home, I can tell you what we don't watch, which is more interesting, as far as I'm concerned. But I think about Alberto too. I don't see sport. I don't see soccer. I don't see the Sanremo Festival. I think I'm the only person in Italy who's never seen the Sanremo Festival. I don't see songs. I don't see...
Io posso dirti allora che
maybe you don't see this. They say that those who work for television don't watch television. I watch his programs. I think that when you broadcast it, you see it completely different and you're frightened because you put very careful in editing it and then everything, so it's completely different, so you're frightened. But should I say, the programs, and I think you too, that I watch are the ones that enrich you with the knowledge and news, or even programs that are talking about things you don't know about because you're curious, you want to know about, you would like to live 1,000 years to get to know the people and things because things evolve. But I must say the book that we presented here should be rewritten. The book that we presented here should be rewritten because things have changed. So I think you should rewrite it. But I have here a book by Piero Angela. That was his first book, and it is his thesis rewritten. It's museums and exhibitions, how to communicate through objects. And this book, which has been reprinted and has been reprinted, is used also by architects to prepare the museums, the sort of prepare meaning to build them, design them. When Alberto prepared this book, he spoke to Pino Zappalà. Pino Zappalà is the one who founded Experimenta, this interactive exhibition that had 20 editions. And Experimenta was an enormous experiment because it introduced interaction between visitors and the object that was exhibited. That is to say, put at the center not communication, one-directional communication, but bi-directional communication between the visitors and the object. And this is something that had been done in Trieste, Boudini, the great physicist and great popularizer, but in Turin it became an institution. Experimenta is still, I think, a brand name. And Alberto interviewed him, and in this book they talk about his part of history of Turin. The rest of the book is virtually of foreign museums and so on and so forth, because the foreigners are very good. The Anglo-Saxons, we know, are very good. So this is the surprise that I have. A copy of your first book. It has a cover which is so strange that it helps you understand how science and knowledge have to be dealt with. If you enter directly, here you see a child on the shoulders of the father and enters the head of a dinosaur. It's clearly in a natural history museum, so it's very nice. Although I found every now and again these books on the same shelves with dinosaurs, and I kept saying, it's something different. This is summarizing this idea of the fact that you are protagonists of this discovery. And so I say that when we prepare our programs, is not only explaining things, but emotionally involve people in the discovery and involve. Certainly you cannot enter like that child was saying, but you can feel a protagonist with us, with movement movements that the camera gives you, the 3D, you understand how an Etruscan tomb is made, or like Bozzetto, who helps you understand exactly something which you can't see. And this is the big difference. Reading on books is flat, while when you manage to popularize in this way and involve people emotionally, emotions fix. So start with your emotions, because those are fixed in your memory, and then conveying the rational message. This is one of the secrets which Rosa Brusin was asking about. Maybe Rosa Brusin wanted to extract this lesson. I'm going to say something which should just come into my mind. I think that the people who've been here this evening will never be united, put together again. So we must take a photo, because I don't think, let's call them all, because we already had a photo at the back. We've had the photo, but now we'll have one. And now I will tell you that we all locked them up in a little room at the back, because so that he wouldn't see them. Who's going to take the photo? Is there a photographer? There you are.
Ok. Foto di
Allora,
gruppo.
lasciatemi
Group
venire in
photo.
mezzo a questi due bellissimi.
Please, I want to be in
persone.
between these very two beautiful people.
Posso?
May I?
Dai, lascia fare le foto.
Ecco qua, pronti?
There we are.
Fatto.
Fatto.
There we
Facciamo
are.
delle vere fotografie.
Now let's have the real photos.
Bruno Bozzetto,
Bruno Bozzetto, Lorenzo Pinno, Massimo Polidoro, Alberto Angela, Silvio Rosa Brusin, an unknown 90-year-old, Barbara Gallarotti, Alberto Agliotti.
Grazie.
Thank you very much.
Piero Bianucci.
Piero Bianucci, and all of you,
Serata fantastica.
for this wonderful evening, unforgettable.
È stata un'occasione unica,
Beautiful, it'll never be repeated. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon. And I hope to see all these people soon. What are you doing this evening? This evening, we know that you are going to sign books if you want to. You've got a book signing session. You'll have to do this. Thank you very much. The next GiovedìScienza is on Thursday, this time really. So this week we will be talking about microbiota. So in about 3 days, all here.
Grazie.